What's up, everybody? I'm Abatage, and welcome to a new episode of the How Long to Beat podcast, featuring myself and my ever-present co-host, Pokepaw.
Hello there. If this podcast ever turns hands or gets sold somewhere, I think I'm part of the pack here.
Yeah, you come with the podcast.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to do the usual, talk about what we've beaten, and we have beaten some stuff this week, or at least I have. No retirements, but we're going to talk about what we've been playing, because we both have been playing things, of course.
So I've been playing Hell.
Yep, Paul's still stuck in hell, so we'll hear all about that. And our discussion topic for today, we're going to talk about what does indie mean in 2024, the whole idea of indie games, indie studios, those sorts of things, because indie doesn't really mean what it started off meaning anymore. And we're going to talk about that. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with our guessing game, of course, where Paula is going to quiz me, and I'm going to get it first go from the first clue really quickly and get max points, and it'll be glorious. So look forward to that one, because I'm sure that's what's going to happen.
I love your enthusiasm.
Yeah, nothing else will go wrong there. So anyway, I'm the only one who's beaten stuff this week, so I'm going to start off. And last week I talked about Chants of Senna, and this week, and between then and now, I have finished it. I pretty much mainlined it for a few days.
Not only mainlining, like you blasted through it.
Yeah, it was really good, and I had a lot of fun. But I find I'm usually pretty quick with like point and click kind of puzzle games, and not that this is a point and click puzzle game, but this is very much a puzzle exploration game, so it's kind of in my wheelhouse anyway. So I feel like I just kind of managed to get through it pretty quick because I was just digging it and it made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole point of the game, you don't really understand what's going on until the very end, which is kind of cool because there is a story and there is a kind of setup and everything, but it doesn't really reveal itself until the very end of the game. So I'm not going to spoil that. But the main gameplay of the game is that you are a person who is working your way through a series of levels, which are very different environments, essentially. And they have different populations of people in this kind of weird, kind of alienish world, even though they're humans, but it seems completely foreign and, not like it's what we understand on Earth these days. But each of these groups that you move through, so initially you're in just like a kind of regular sort of towny kind of area where you meet people and they speak languages that you don't understand, and it's displayed on screen by all these weird glyphs, kind of like a hieroglyphic kind of language. And as you kind of witness glyphs or read them on the walls or find them on tablets or something, you record them in your notebook, and you can basically note down what you think they mean.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you learn more and more of the language, you get points where you can basically kind of make a decision about what you think it means, and the game will kind of confirm it for you if you get it right and then tell you what it actually means. So for instance, one glyph I thought meant like hello, but they put it down as just a greeting. So it's like a generic kind of greeting. So, I got it right, but it wasn't like necessarily 100% right because the wording was a little bit different. Or there might be, there was another one that's for something like to go somewhere, but I think the actual meaning was like to go and or pass from one place to another. So, there's all these like little nuances about the languages and stuff. And the whole thing about the game is that as you move through the game, through each area, you encounter different people and they all speak different languages. So they don't all speak the same language. And they all have different glyphs and everything that represents their language. So you've got to kind of also interpret one language to another language and back again in order to kind of get all the story and progress and all that kind of thing. So you kind of go through different zones. You go through one which is like a very kind of lush relaxed kind of artsy zone where all the bards live, because they're all like different classes of people in this society. So the first mob are just like regular old plebs, and then you meet like bards who make music, and there's like theaters there and everything. And then you go into like a fortress where there's warriors who have like swords and stuff, and there's some stealth sections where you've got to try not to get caught and all that kind of thing. Then you go into like another area where there's like a bunch of alchemists who are like scientists and that sort of stuff, and they're doing experiments and things, and you can kind of help them with that. And eventually you're basically working your way up a mountain, and you get to the top of the mountain and you find like I forget what they were called, but basically the race of people who are in charge of everything and are like the top dogs. But something has happened to them, and through learning all the languages and everything, you kind of have to learn to how to unite everyone in the end, because because of all their differences in language and all that, they don't speak to each other and they don't like each other. So you kind of end up making them like each other and bringing peace to the world, kind of thing.
It's kind of interesting because, like, first of all, I feel like it's uh like a kind of like reverse Babylon Tower stairs. I don't remember.
Mhm.
Where because like because they tried to make like staircase or something to heaven. Uh, the god said like, well, no, you're gonna get different languages, so you can organize that way.
Well, it could be based on that sort of idea, yeah.
Yeah, because you're like going up, but at the same time, you want to have like these people with different languages and different backgrounds like unite in some kind of way, even
Yeah.
though they have the different languages and they can't understand each other. So it's kind of interesting that way.
Yeah. And, in the grand scheme of things, you're not like learning full languages. You're maybe learning, I want to say, like the meaning of perhaps 40 different glyphs per language. So a number that are like 40 different phrases or terms. And in a couple of them, one of them is even just a plural indicator. So if you're saying something in a plural, you might say like human followed by a plural glyph, so that you're saying humans instead.
Yeah,
Whereas in one of the other languages, they just repeat the same word to make it plural. So they'd say like human, and that's the plural.
yeah,
Or in one of the other languages, they say everything backwards compared to the other languages. So if you were to say, there's a lot of phrases that are like, warriors like music. So you've got warriors like and music. And this other language would say something like music warriors like. So you've got to kind of figure out that syntax. And because there's points where you can kind of compare sentences, because they mean the same, but they're in different languages, and you know one language, but you don't know the other one. So you can kind of like directly translate. But if you don't understand that it's actually a bit flipped and stuff, then you can kind of get it wrong anyway. So yeah, it's a really cool idea for puzzles, I think.
it kind of like very relatable in a way, especially like for people who have to learn another language. Pretty much anyone who doesn't know English
Mm,
like as a native speaker.
mm,
Because language are like that. Like I am fluent in English,
mhm,
but my original language, like my mother language, is Spanish. But
mhm.
I also study a little bit of Japanese, and it's kind of like interesting because like English is kind of like a bit of like scramble compared to Spanish.
Yep.
Um, but Japanese has like some things that are similar to Spanish, but then it goes like out of its way to have like the fucking verb at the end of every sentence instead of being like somewhere in the middle or like start or whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it is actually like very funny to compare them because, um, uh, for example, if I went to say Paula's notebook, a
Mhm.
notebook as in computer, because oh yeah, we actually use notebook for laptop here. So
Yeah, so some of them are called that here as well. So, yeah.
So instead of saying, well, you say Paula's notebook,
Mhm.
but in Spanish you say el notebook de Paula. So it's kind of backwards in that way.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I think it's not in Japanese, but I'm gonna use pasokon, which is personal computer. So it would be like Paula no pasokon in Japanese. So it's kind of like the same order in Japanese as in Spanish in this case, but English is totally like backwards in a way. So it's interesting. But then, like, Japanese has this weird thing where you can just make entire sentence with just a verb, and that's all that
Yeah, right.
matters.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, I think we were gonna say the same thing, that I would really like this game.
Yeah. I was gonna say this. That's why I think you would really like this game, because that's the main gameplay, is that figuring out language and exploring areas to figure it out more, and just kind of discovering the world that you're in. And then by the end of it, you do kind of figure out, okay, now I know exactly what's going on. So you kind of backtrack through everything you've done very quickly, kind of teleport around a bit, and do stuff that kind of resolves the game. But obviously, I'm not going to give that away. So yeah.
Yeah.
But Chance of Senna was really, really good, and really, really good. I'm really glad I played it, because it was actually surprisingly a lot better than I even thought it would be. So, definitely a highlight of recent months for me. It's just my kind of game. So, yeah. I also picked up a new release called Duck Detective: The Secret Salami.
Did you play like a demo for this one on Steam
I
Next
really
Fest
did.
or something like that?
I played the demo in Steam Next Fest, which was, the demo was basically made up of the tutorial of the game, where you do like a very, very silly and short case that kind of gives you the mechanics of the game. And then, yeah, this one obviously goes into a full case, but it was only, I want to say it was about $15 to pick up, and I kind of was a bit disappointed, because it was too short essentially, and not very satisfying.
Uh,
So the idea is, though, for anyone playing along, it's a point and click game where you play as a duck detective. Funnily enough, you're a duck and you're a detective. Cool. So the whole thing is, you're trying to solve a case that you've been hired to solve, and you do that by exploring your environment, finding clues, finding objects, that sort of stuff, and doing a lot of talking to other characters and discussing clues. And you can ask them about other characters, you can ask them about clues you've found, as well as just talking to them and finding out more about them. And the whole kind of central loop, I guess, is that you've got your notebook, which is full of different information. So one of the pages is all the people you've met, and you've got to kind of figure out their names and what they're into and all that kind of stuff. You then have all your items you've collected, so you've got to figure out the items you collected and where they came from, and what kind of information you can pick up from them. Because sometimes it could be you've managed to look at someone's computer, so you can kind of pick up a few clues based on what they've got on their screen, and that will become an item in your dossier, for want of a better word. But then you also have different kind of case missions, I suppose, where, say, the very first part of the case that you end up doing in the game is, one of the first things you have to figure out is who hired you, because all you know is that you got a call from some random person to go to a location. And I'm purposely not giving much away, because there's not a lot to this game. So as soon as you give something away, you've given away a lot. And basically you go to this location where there's lots of people and a crime has been committed, but you don't even know who's hired you yet. So your first kind of two jobs is to figure out who hired you by talking to people and interrogating them and that sort of thing, and finding clues, but also to determine all the facts about the case that you're going to investigate. So going to the crime scene, figuring out what happened, talking to people, all that kind of thing. And it's, the good things about this game is it's entirely voice acted, and voice acted well. Like they kind of ham it up a lot, and it's really, really not being serious at all, and it's taking itself not seriously at all, and it's very kind of funny in parts because they do kind of they kind of just go a bit over the top, and it might not be to everyone's kind of taste, but I found it gave me a few chuckles here and there, so I kind of liked it. And the Dutch detective himself kind of narrates everything as if he's this, hard-boiled kind of gumshoe film noir kind of detective, but then talks about being a duck as well. And there's lots of puns because you have to make deductions, and you have there's puns about your bill and being a duck and feathers and just all that kind of shit all the way through it, which is kind of fun. I like that kind of stuff. I'm a pun fan. Ultimately, the graphics are good as well. So it's a kind of 3D isometric viewpoint, but all the characters are kind of 2D. They look like paper cutout kind of characters. So as they move, they kind of flip around and stuff. And they do have different poses and all this kind of stuff, but they're kind of cartoony and very basic in that sense. Like they're not 3D animated or anything, or even 2D animated for that much. They're just like sprites that move around, but it works and it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good stuff, really. And I like the whole method of investigation where you find clues and you put them together and you piece them together, and then when you've figured out stuff, when you've made more deductions, you get a big stamp in your book that says, "Yeah, you got it right." On to the next one, and you get given the next kind of mystery. However, I was playing it, and I ended up playing it all in one session because it took about 2.5 hours to
It is a
finish.
very short game.
It is very short, and I thought I was on like the first chapter of the game until I finished it and the credits rolled and it said it's over, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's where it ends. So I kind of, maybe I was thinking it might be a bit more like Ace Attorney or something where you play multiple cases, but instead this one is just one case, and there's multiple stages to it, but each stage is only like, a 10-minute kind of mystery to solve. There's not much to it, and the location is very one location, and you kind of get to know it really well by the end of it because you spend 2 hours in the exact same location, not really doing much. So once you've explored everything and talked to everybody, some things do kind of change over time, but ultimately it's the same. So it gets a bit boring in that sense. But yeah, I felt a bit shortchanged, I think, on what could have been in the game. I would have liked maybe it to be, even if it was like a 3-act thing and this was the first act and then there was 2 others, that would have probably felt a bit more satisfying, I suppose, because this one was just, it was good. What I played was good, but it just really felt undercooked. And, I'm sure whoever worked on it really hard, and it took a lot of time and effort and money to kind of get it to the point that it is at. I just feel like it needed more. So yeah, maybe I'd wait for a sale or something if you're going to pick this one up, rather than getting it at full price or even 10% off or whatever it was on launch, because it just needs a bit extra. Or I hope maybe they sell a few and they get some DLC down the line, which adds more cases or that kind of thing, because the fundamentals, the format of it is really good. There's just not enough of it. So I hope they kind of expand it a bit more in the future if they get the opportunity to. So yeah, it was good, but not something I would recommend. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, though I was looking at the page on Steam because, like, if it's spelled right, it was like, oh, maybe there was like someone like pretty much telling them to put the game like out in the wild, but it seems that they were like an industry without like a publisher, and they like self-published the thing. So I feel
Yeah.
like it was maybe like inside pressure, I guess, or they were at the point that they were like, okay, we have the thing, let's put it out and see what people think, or something like that.
Yeah, and I can understand if it's a small team and all that kind of thing, that it probably took them a while to get what is there done. So they probably got to the point where they're like, yep, it's done. Of course, we'd love to do more because I'm sure everyone would love to do more anyway. But they've done what they can do and they need to kind of put it out and sell it. So yeah, I get all that, and that's cool, and I'm totally, in support of that anyway. But for my money as a player, like we were talking about, we had this discussion a few episodes ago or something, when we were talking about, what makes a game worth it.
Worth it, yeah.
And I've played shorter games that cost more that I thought were more worth it than this game.
Mhm.
So it kind of confuses me in that sense, because it's not because it was only 2.5 hours, like that doesn't bother me.
It's because they weren't like excellent in a way, or
Yeah,
like they weren't as polished.
it felt like it's just when you're in the middle of it and you're playing it, you feel like there's going to be more, and then there isn't. So whether that's because of the way they told the story, or because of the pacing, or because of the amount of content, perhaps, I can't really put my finger on it. But it's just that vibe of, I'm expecting there's going to be something else, and then there isn't. That's what kind of left me feeling a bit shortchanged. Because I feel like, especially if you played lots of games, you get a vibe for the game. Kind of tells you when it's about to finish, or when you're kind of reaching the end, or if you're still in the beginning or something. You can kind of pick that up as you go, even if you don't know it like to the minute, obviously. But you kind of get a vibe for the flow of a game and when it's going to finish, or how much content there is, or that kind of thing. And this one, I think, kind of just felt a bit different, and I felt like there was going to be more when there wasn't. So anyway, I don't want to go on about it all the time, because it's good. It's just, kind of short and underwhelming. But what's there is cool. So I'd definitely still say check out the demo, because that kind of does give you a very good vibe about what the game is about. So that's always good. But yeah, maybe wait for a bit of a discount before getting too deep into it. Or it's the kind of game I could see ending up on Game Pass anyway, or something like that. So,
Yeah. Hey, good thing for Latin America people, at the very least in Chile, is like a third of the price that you said it was in Australia. So
yeah, cool. But I'm sure it's all relative anyway. So your mileage may vary, I suppose.
yeah.
But speaking of Game Pass, the final game that I finished, which I finished just before we started recording, is Lil Gator Game, which I started a few weeks ago, or maybe a bit longer. I mentioned it then. This is a kind of 3D, third-person rather, exploration game, which reminds me a lot of A Short Hike, for anyone who's played that.
Mm-hmm.
Except this one is you're a little alligator, hence the name of the game, and you're on an island essentially trying to make friends and play with your sister, who's now much older and has gone off to university and is kind of hanging out with you, but working on an assignment at the same time on her laptop. So she's not really playing with you, but you're like, I want to go play, and we used to play when we were kids, and and now you don't want to play anymore. So your whole point of the game, like the bulk of the game, is that as a little kid, you're trying to essentially play so hard with all these friends that your sister's going to be like, oh man, I want to go play too. And that's like, that's your whole goal. That's your whole purpose in the game. So in order to do that, you basically explore this island and you meet lots of different characters, like lots of different characters. I think there's about 40 different characters or something to meet that you can make friends with. And they essentially are the quests on the island. And so each of them need something, or have lost something, or want you to do something. And they've quite a variety of different things. So, you go help them out, and then they become your friend, and they go to the playground, which is kind of in the center of the map. And every time you make a friend, they go back to the playground. And certain groups of friends then will turn the playground into different areas. So, one particular group makes a big kind of castle out of cardboard and textures and things.
I love that so much.
It's really cool. And another group kind of sets up like a market that they're going to play at, being a market thing. Yeah, and things like that. And there's about 4 groups all up, but then there's lots of individual dudes as well who you make friends with, and they come back and play in the playground with you. And all the while, your sister is like sitting on a swing nearby, but just on her laptop working on her assignment. And as you kind of explore the island, looking for different new friends and different things to do, the whole island is covered in like cardboard cutout monsters. So they look like essentially cardboard with crayon monsters drawn on the front. And that's kind of your currency, because the more of them you destroy, you then pick up the scraps of scrap paper and all that. And that's what you use to then craft things. Like you can craft different weapons, you can craft different hats. So I ended the game with a bucket on my head because I happened to get a bucket hat. You also craft different shields, so you can get like a garbage can lid, or you can get like a plate, or you can get like a big leaf that ends up being a shield. And your shield you can also sit on and kind of ride around as if it's like a sled, because there are certain areas where you want to kind of slide down the hill and collect things. And yeah, so you're doing lots and lots of different activities, and it's quite varied as well. And around the place there are also these monkeys who give you bracelets, and this is basically like the feathers in a short hike. The more bracelets you get, the more stamina you have to then climb up higher things, because you can climb up trees, you can climb up basically up any surface, and it's just limited by how much stamina you've got, which runs out pretty quick at first. But then with a few more bracelets, it adds more stamina, and you can climb up higher and higher and higher. So yeah, it's really, really cool because you are spending your whole time just trying to play and have fun. And it's got a really nice vibe of just like make believe and kids just out in the wilderness having fun and making shit up. And there's like the cool kids who are hanging out and they're like, we don't want to play because we're like too cool. And so you show them how to have fun. You're like, check this out. This is really fun. We're going to kill some monsters. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that's kind of fun. Let's do that too. And you have a good time and you become friends. And they're like, yeah, we'll come back to the playground with you and like do stuff. And you're like, yay, more friends. And there's like a whale that you meet as well, who you can kind of climb up on his back and he'll shoot you high in the air if you jump on his blowhole. And he's like, yeah, that's fun. Let's play. So, you make friends with everybody. And there's some adults around as well who you kind of help out, and they'll come and kind of not necessarily play, but they just kind of hang out in the playground as well, because you've met them and they're like, oh, we'll come keep an eye on the kids kind of thing. Yeah, so it's really wholesome in that sense, but it's also a lot of fun, and it's not challenging, I would say, in any way. Like, it's not a difficult game, but you do kind of have the island that you're on is like large enough and complex enough that you can kind of get lost if you're not paying attention. There was a whole area that I didn't even realize I hadn't explored until the very end of the game, where I realized I still needed to find another group of friends to fill out my playground. But I didn't know where they were until I found this other area. And I'm like, oh, of course, this is where they are. Because basically each area has a group of friends that you make. So it's a good map in that sense, because it really encourages exploration, and it really encourages, going both vertically and horizontally to find things. Meanwhile, as you kind of run around, you also find memories that you have of when you were younger and your sister was younger and you used to play here all the time playing games. And so it's got this really kind of sweet, kind of nostalgic, melancholy side of the story where, you're trying to play so hard that you impress your sister, but at the same time you're remembering about all the times you did play with your sister when you were younger. And you're kind of like, oh yeah, that was cool when we did that. And yeah, she taught me how to do that and she helped me up that ledge and, blah, blah, blah. But every time you go back to her during the game, she's like, nah, I don't want to play. Just leave me alone. I've really got to get my work done. See you later. And
See you later,
the ending is
alligator.
exactly.
I'm sorry.
And no. But the ending is not quite what you'd expect. It's not like they just all resolve their problems and everything. There's a real kind of moment where I don't want to spoil anything because it's really good, but essentially you as the little brother and her as the older sister kind of have to come to a compromise and understand each other's point of view in order to come to a resolution. And it's really emotional, and I may have cried a bit because it's very touching and it's very sweet, and it's just a really good kind of ending that makes you feel good. And yeah, I think this game is brilliant. And I remember when it came out and everyone raved about it and said it was really, really good. And it got really good critical reception as well. And I think it deserves every single bit of that because it's awesome. And it's on Game Pass, so go play it if you've got Game Pass.
I kind of feel like I'm gonna be like the other sister of the tale because I have a nephew, and I think he was born when I was 15 or 14, something like that.
Mm.
Maybe 14, I don't know. Anyway, the thing is that there has been times when we're like at the same place, but we cannot play because I have to do stuff for uni, so we have to compromise on that.
Mm.
Uh, so I feel like I'm gonna cry, but I wanna play it. So
Well, and this is where the really nice thing about this game is throughout the game, because you're playing as the younger brother, you are constantly frustrated that your sister's not going to play with you. And you kind of miss playing with your sister as you used to back in the day. And, that's the best thing ever when she'd come, when you guys would hang out and play together. That was like, the shit. And now she's like too busy and you kind of get frustrated. And initially you kind of think, yeah, she's being like an adult and kind of losing her fun and not paying attention to what's important and all that kind of thing. But that's where the ending gets really good because it subverts that quite a bit. And you don't end up hating her. You actually end up really liking her because, again, I don't want to spoil it,
but
but she has reasons for being that way
yeah.
that you then ultimately can understand and have empathy for and kind of almost support her with. And they both realize that about each other. And they're just kind of like, yeah, they don't necessarily have to change anything, but they can appreciate each other a lot more and, not get frustrated by the change of circumstances, for want of a better word.
Mhm.
That's as much as I'm comfortable saying without spoiling it and ruining the good time for everybody. So
I'm gonna have to play this so we can have a spoiler cast.
Yeah. Because oh man, there's something, I think because I have an older sister who, I've obviously had my whole life, but we've had our ups and downs as well, like everyone does, and all that kind of thing. But we grew up together in a situation where we did hang out a lot together because we spent a lot of time overseas and traveling and stuff. So ultimately, we were each other's only available child friend at many times. So anytime I play a game where it's a story about, especially a younger brother with an older sister, just like my older sister and me, it really kind of gets to me real hard because I can relate. And it makes sense. And I get the feels like 100% spot on, which is great and a compliment to this game because they obviously nail it a little and it feels very authentic and genuine as opposed to just trying to, present something that perhaps someone might be disingenuous about. It seems like it's an actually well written and well conceived kind of story, which is great. Again, so yeah, Little Gator Game is awesome. It's definitely not the kind of game I even thought I'd get that excited about, but yeah.
It
Again,
is.
another highlight. Yeah, another highlight of the last few months for me because it's just, it just kept getting better, put it that way. It's one of those games where you're enjoying it and then it gets better and you're like, oh, this is really cool. And then it gets even better and you're like, oh, rad. And then it ends and you're like, fuck, that was a good ending. And you're just like totally satisfied with everything. So yeah, that's the last of what I beat in the last week. Because I finished off a couple and yeah, did another quick one. So I'm going to shut up now and pass over to you, Pokepaw, who has been still roaming around hell and playing some other things, I see. Why don't you take it away?
I mean, in a way, managing Subway is hell too, so.
Precisely.
Yeah, I've been back to playing Mini Metro, and I am rusty as all hell. So I decided to try to high score again, like the first map, the was it the London map? Yeah, the London map. And I didn't even get like half the score that I got last time. So I'm gonna have to like take that rust away and stuff. But
It's funny
still,
how it's a bit of a skill though, to that you get into the rhythm of with like creating your maps and that sort of thing. Like you can lose it, or you can kind of get in the groove.
yeah, like it also depends a lot of what RNGs has prepared for you. Because sometimes RNGs is an asshole, and and you get stations like in weird places where you have to use like extra tunnels or extra bridges. So that can get a little bit tiring, or like even just like, okay, I have 2 tunnels, but I need 3. How the hell do I do that? So you have to sometimes like compromise, do things not in quite the best way possible. But again, the way you learn to adapt is kind of like a skill in it out itself, which I kind of lost. So I'm hoping for maybe next week. I'm also gonna convince my boyfriend that we play like the next map, so I can like actually like advance through my mini metro endeavors. Oh yeah, because this game is on my boyfriend's tablet, so if he hasn't like advanced yet, I cannot advance, or that's the rule we put in place. So yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, another news, the game that I've been playing a lot of, and when I say a lot of, I do really mean it. Like I have more than 30 hours on this game already, maybe 31. Like let me check real quick on my playing tab. So I think like last week, and not even like a full week, even. I was out of the common road and somewhere in the middle of Kiku's route because I was like 10 or 11 hours in. I'm now 32 hours in, pretty much. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I finished. Well, first of all, I finished Kiku's uh, route, which I have to agree with what most people say, that even though the route itself is kind of cute, the pacing is a bit of a mess.
Right.
And I feel like this one so far is the route that suffers the most of the poor pacing. It's still a lot of fun. It's still very cute. It still tugs at your heartstrings at some point because of what both Kiku and his sister has gone through. But there's still things that I think would have been managed a little bit better. One thing that I want to do before jumping into the next route is to see like what the extras were. Not only if you get like the bad ending, you get like I'm gonna say like an extra scene that is not too long, but it's supposed to be like a post-bad ending thing
Right.
that gives you like a bit of hope. And it's kind of sad, not gonna lie. It was very bittersweet. And you get like an extra CG that way. The bad ending gives you an extra CG. And for the final one, you get like the second extra that is actually like the post happy ending extra kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's kind of funny because the all the extra content, like I saw the screen because it had like this honeycomb kind of like pattern to it, and there's a lot of stuff to cover. Like holy crap, I haven't like even like seen everything that Kiku's route unlocked, but so far they have like 2 extra thingies. One of which is like a silly interview for the love interest in turn. The second one being like this extra story, like after story to the happy ending. but you also get like a kind of like a journal entry for the both the love interest of the route and the main antagonist of the route, to see like a little bit more of their past in a way.
Cool.
And also you get a number of, I still don't know if they're like extra journals or extra scenes, but there are like five or four, between five and six for each. So that's a lot of content.
Yeah. No wonder you're racking up
Uh,
those hours.
yeah, though I know for a fact, since a big part of the team behind Tengoku Struggle is also behind Olympia Soare, and they did like a very similar thing with the extras.
Mm.
I know for a fact they're probably like really short, but just long enough for you to have like a firmer grasp on what was going on behind the scenes during your adventures, or even like before your adventure, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Like even like with the I'm gonna say like in Olympia Sore, like one single short story that was more of a journal, it changed my outlook on a character like entirely.
Wow. Cool.
So they're like very well written in a way.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, I finished Kiku's route, jump to Yona's route. Murakami Yona was on the revival hell, and that's the hell where murderers go to. So he was a samurai, and the thing is that in his eyes, defeating like very strong opponents or very important people would make him like stronger or more or look more important himself. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like um the gist behind his character. And the thing with this one, well, I said like every character has something against women, I guess. Kiko is not so clear why, but
Right.
Jonah was like, yeah, I kind of like got poisoned by some women sent by the people that supposedly surrender. So I kind of have trust issues in that regard. And it's like, okay, okay, I get it somehow, but yeah. Um. So in his route, uh, you go against, what was it? Their name, because there were two characters. Uh, I'm looking for the screenshot with the wait, was it? Oh no. Uh, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Got confused for a moment. Got my routes mixed up. You go against a couple of characters that are literally like a couple,
Yeah.
that are Izumo no Okuni, which like in universe, and I don't know if it comes like from the real legend or whatever. Uh, the legend says like, and this is like a very well known legend in this world's hell.
Yeah.
Um, she died before her lover, and her lover eventually came and carried her over the Sansu River. And that's like a very like believed and sought after story, like for especially for the girls that end up in hell, because it's like I like everyone is like, I wish someone would carry me over the Sansu River. Like holy crap. Uh, Otichi, being like the protagonist's best friend, and also like she literally like set her house on fire on the house to see the person she like again. She's like very into romance and into the this kind of legend, and she actually sees Okuni like as some kind of like idol in a way. uh this route is kind of weird in the sense of um like these two people, Okuni and Sansaburo, that is her lover in a way, and the main antagonist of this route. They kind of like don't want to harm like civilians, especially as Ensemble, because he was like a samurai too, and he was like, okay, I won't, I will only like battle against like warriors and not like civilians. But so it's like they're doing nothing, and it was like I was supposed to carry them back to hell. They haven't like broke any rules, so what the fuck I'm supposed to do with you? Uh, so it ends up more like Yona himself and Sansabura having this kind of like rivalry, to the point that Sansabura says like, okay, only there's only enough room for us to enough room for one of us here. So
Yeah.
they have like this ongoing like rivalry through the route.
Mhm.
Um, which is kind of interesting because both of them are like trying to atone for whatever they did in the past in a way,
Yep.
but each one goes through it like in a different way. Like since we're like was supposed to protect someone and he failed, so that's like the thing that keeps him well around here. And Okuni is just here for the ride because he was like, yeah, I got separated from him like once, so if he decided to escape to the human world, I'm just following him. So the real fight is with Sensambura. The road is pretty cute, uh, probably because Yona is not only a tsundere and doesn't know how to words pretty much.
Right.
He's pretty blunt, but he's like being blunt because he cares or whatever. A very common trope in this genre. But also he's like a big softy and he's like he cries very easily, even though he's like a very rough man from the seas. So it's the gap more is real. Like the gap between uh, him being rough and who he really is like is real. And yeah, one funny thing that I feel like I commented on before is
Yeah.
that the other characters, like the four characters that are living like in this house, like on this mission, it's almost like they have like a gentleman's agreement in which like if the protagonist chooses for like one of them, like they cannot like help along to the chosen one in a way. So in this case, like Sadaku in particular, like Sadaku is like the best wingman, like to the point that it is extremely funny, extremely endearing in a way.
Nice.
So yeah, like they managed to defeat Sansamburo instead of outright purging him. They kind of like send him and Okuni like back to hell. It did take a couple of attempts to actually like take him down, but whatever. Um, and um, and what else? Yeah, I think like the crowd like was closed neatly in a way. But at this point, I was like, hey, maybe they are gonna build the no. Everyone is kind of like doing this because they believe in such and such, and it's not really their fault that they're like this way. No, they actually like throw that out of the window on Chaleco's route and like gave the villain of the week like a proper punishment here because holy crap, this was something. So far, like these two routes are still like on the lighter side of the drama scale,
Right.
but Jericho, even if his route didn't like go all in, it really dug deep into some really serious stuff.
Mm.
So Jericho is from the Crashing Hill. Yeah, Crashing Hill,
Yep.
which is both known as the place where those who committed promiscuous acts go to, but also it's known as the paradise of lewdness or something like that. It's pretty much like a running joke at this point. Um, so Charaku is a very interesting character in the sense that he tries to help people, but doesn't want to admit it's because he wants to.
Right.
Uh, but also, he kind of like he likes taking care of others in a way. Uh, like I think I said that Kikunosuke, who has like this desire where he has like wolf blood slash powers and he becomes like a full on wolf. When he's like either like too weak or whatever.
Yeah.
Like Sadako likes taking care of him when he's like in that state, and he just brushes his fur, like tends to him so he gets better and stuff like that. And I said that there's also like this Hellcat called Tamao, and Sadako very much has him like on the palm of his hand because like he's like such a good servant to him. So it's kind of like interesting, like how his route goes. Also, like he is a neat freak. He cannot handle the house being dirty or like disorganized in any way, shape, or form. And he actually bought like a vacuum cleaner from hell with a fucking spirit AI that pretty much was worth an entire month of salary.
Mm.
And he was like, "Yeah, I'll survive off of water." And I was like, "I feel very attacked because that's the way I react when I buy like a special edition of some kind." Uh, but yeah, it's kind of like his character is kind of funny in a way, but he's also like kind of crass and always talks in innuendos is given the chance because he's from the Cartoon Hell for fuck's sake.
Mhm.
But has like some unexpected talents, but like being like a very good artist. And he's actually based off like a real world uh, artist that was kind of like iconic of its time, which name is just Charakuda also.
Mhm.
Um, so that was a very interesting thing. The villain of this route is as let me look for the name. Like holy fuck, I see him in this frame, but Asaemon, yeah, Asaemon. And the reason is like first of all, Asaemon was the one that executed Saraku at some point. Uh, Also, Saraku is like not his real name; it's like an alias, but more on that later. And Asaemon seems to have been like both executioner, sorry, and has killed over 4,000 people, but also he used the prisoners that he was executing to try out new blades. So,
As you do,
uh,
yeah.
as you do.
Sounds fair.
Uh, so, yeah. Uh, Saraku in particular, like, there was one weird thing that I found is that Sino, that was like the woman behind like these other prisoners escaping and trying like to trick humans into doing something. She was also trying to bring Charako like into their side, but I guess because Charako like kind of like okay, besides the loot stuff, like Charako also killed 13 women in particular. But he did so in attempt to give them like finally like peace in a way because
Oh,
at the
so like
time,
nicely.
yeah, in a way, but at the time, and it's kind of like a real thing. Um, Syphilis was known as, first of all, like an illness that was usually contracted by those like sex workers, pretty much.
Mhm.
And if a sex worker caught syphilis, not only like her worth would plummet, she would pretty much work for little pennies. Uh, she would also have her days like counted because at that point there was no cure.
Mhm.
So at some point, it would like eat at her body like so much at the point that she didn't even know like who the fuck she was. So that's the heavy stuff on that route. So
Nice.
Saragus said like at that point, like the only thing that they were asking for is to be killed and pretty much put out of their misery. And he couldn't say no in a way because he saw like so much suffering. Like he was kind of like a sex worker at some point too, because shit happened. Like his father used to be a samurai. Some big wig didn't like him, so he got executed. His mother, pretty much, he had to make money for him and his mother, because his mother was heartbroken so much that she couldn't do shit. And he ended up being like a sex worker for a while. And as soon as he got like enough money with some other means, he kind of like bought his own liberty or like bought his own freedom and went on to being an artist.
Cool.
So, and that gave him like a surprising amount of debt. But at the same time, since he knew like the traits or like he knew what these women went through, in a way, he was like, yeah, this life is shit and you got the shitty end of the stick. So I'm gonna put you out of your misery because I really cannot do anything more for you. Uh, and yeah, that sent him to the crashing hill with some extra uh, uh, punishment for killing so many people. Um, and maybe
Wild.
because he saw killing this woman as saving them, that's the reason why Shino wanted him on her ranks. So, first of all, his power or desire is called was it absolute zero or something like that? It's kind of funny because he really doesn't like the cold, but for some reason his power is to pretty much fire ice charts because why not?
Hmm.
And he actually like went battle a bunch of times with Asaemon with little uh, success. To the point that they say, "Hey, you die one more fucking time, and we are not. The onsen is not gonna work. Your soul is gonna go mume, and you're gonna disappear, pretty much." Because the thing is that during the blood duels, um, like Rin is capable of absorbing most of the damage, unless it's something she cannot possibly take. Like
Right.
so in that case, like the love interest is gonna take the damage, the full damage of the attack. So she's kind of like a tank in a way.
Yeah.
Another thing that was kind of like explored in his route was Chino's powers,
Hmm.
because well, Asimon being like the executioner, he has the power like called workaholic, and he kind of like makes all these plates appear out of thin air and can attack you with all of them at once. But each of them can strike only once, and then they disappear. Sino, on the other hand, has some kind of power to manipulate people. So she makes this pill, I guess, that pretty much is able to take control of whoever consumes it
Nice.
uh, in a weird way. So and she like can make someone like forget some stuff too. Like for example, there's a character that ran away from home for reasons, and he eventually like ran into Tino. Tino gave him like a thing, and at some point, like he forgot even like the reason why he escaped from home. So they had to like take him in some place and protect him like for the time being until he decided like what to do with his life. And there was a couple that got like um not attacked, but the guy kind of like went to the temple too and got the same power applied to him. But in his case, like he didn't remember anything he did while under the effect of this power. So he was kind of like a puppet in a way. So Shino is kind of like very dangerous.
Mm.
And for more, because of one more way than, but more ways than one. Sorry.
Yeah.
And this route in particular, the criminals ended up getting to hell, and they had to literally like freeze Simon's limbs and pretty much chop his arms or something like that for them to win. And I'm so happy that he didn't get like the same treatment as the others of, hey, he has his circumstances. No, he went to get him punished, and it was like, well, if you survive your sentence, then we'll see what to do with you. Um, and finally, the route I've been working through in the last couple of days, actually like since yesterday, is curiously enough one that is outside of the main four love interests that go with Rin to apprehend the prisoners. This one being Jack. He's supposed to be a human, a normal human, but not so normal after you know him, but whatever. And he is kind of like a musician and a streamer, and he decides to help out uh, the escapees because he has a grudge against hell, and he's like, well, you're doing this to cause trouble, and to cause trouble especially like for people from hell and the humans. Well, I mean, because I want to get my revenge on hell. And that is like, okay, but why do you want revenge, dude? So in order to get information out of him, uh, Rim tries to use him at the same time he's trying to use her. It's kind of funny because like each of them is kind of like hey 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 they've gone right into my trap and stuff like that, while they're in reality walking into each other's trap and just playing nice because they want the other to fall into a trap. So of course, well, first of all, the four prisoners do not like Jack at all. So I said they had like this gentleman's agreement where if one were to finally pursue Rin because Rin fell for them, the others wouldn't like intervene. Actually, they would help. But with Jack, as he is an outsider, they actively tried to sabotage the hell out of him, which ended up being extremely funny. Uh, because it actually kind of like went against, like they tried to break them apart, but brought them closer together because they didn't plan ahead.
Nice.
Um, so in a way, like later down the road, you discover that Jack was actually at some point almost killed, or like he almost died, so he has like a near death experience and ended up in hell. And he says he wants to talk to the person who he met in hell, because he may or may not have attacked that person and almost killed them.
Nice.
It turns out the person he actually attempted to kill in an attempt to save his own skin was the last person on any realm you would want to anger. being Takamura, or as the protagonists call him, Sensei Nono. He was so fucking mad that, first of all, he cast a curse on Jack where he wouldn't be able to die. He was frozen in time as an immortal being. Not only that, unless Jack really repented for his actions, he was invisible to him.
Nice.
So it was like, yeah, good luck, sucker. See
Yeah.
you probably in the next millennia.
That's fucked.
That's the reason why Jack has a grudge against Hell. Because he's immortal, he was cursed because he tried to kill someone from Hell. And the worst possible person at that. So yeah, that is
Cool.
pretty much like where I'm at Jack's route. Even though Jack is kind of like meh, and he did, since he wasn't like really in the common route, like doing shenanigans with the others, he has like kind of like a disadvantage. His initial interactions felt a little bit forced, in my opinion. He is kind of like getting there, but still, he's kind of like a piece of trash. Uh, I just want to see like how this plays out, and I'll eventually get to the final route of this game, which is um, Goemon Ichikawa, which is a very prominent figure in Japanese lore because he's a thief.
Like a real character from Japanese folklore.
Yeah, he's kind of like Robin Hood in a way that because he takes money from the rich, obviously uses part of it for himself, but distributes that wealth to the poor too.
Cool.
So this character has been like um in more than one game actually. There's a game in Ishikawa and another game called Nightshade, which is also an Otome game. Uh, Same idea, but yeah,
Nice.
that's about it for
Whew.
what I've been playing.
Continues to
I've
be
been playing a
epic.
lot of. Hmm?
Sounds very dramatic and very epic.
Yeah. There's I did trim a lot of the stupidity that happens because they're chaos gremlins. Like they do what they want.
Why
So
not if you're in
yeah,
hell, hey?
why not? So what have you been playing? You had the single game that I'm very interested to hear more about.
Yeah, so I mentioned I'd started playing Harold Halibut last week, which is relatively new, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's still brilliant. I put in a little bit more time. This is one of those games that I'm loving so much that I'm kind of savoring it, and I don't want to blast through it too quickly because I really, really like everything about it, and I've yet to find a single flaw in the game. So, you know, even down to the point where you walk around and you can either walk or you can hold down like X to do a little jog and kind of move faster. Nah, I'm walking. I'm just taking my time, cruising around the place, going from, location to location. And there's a bit of getting around because there's a bit of a backtracking or like going to see different people in different locations. So if you missed last week, the basic premise of Harold Halibut is that you play a character called Harold Halibut, who is a maintenance worker in, I don't know if there's an actual name for the city that I've been told yet or not, but essentially Earth was on the way out and a bunch of people jumped in a spaceship and took off. And this is set in the future, obviously, because of that. It's kind of I think it's in like the 23rd century or something, like so a few hundred years ahead from now. And they took off kind of just hoping that they'd find a habitable planet somewhere out there in the universe over time. And it turns out that they eventually did, although, well, they found one that they were heading for, and then they kind of, I think the ship hit something and they had to crash land on that planet anyway, but they found out that the whole planet is a big ocean planet. So it's just all water. and there's basically nothing but water, really. Like there's a tiny core, but then everything else is water. So they crash landed, and they basically converted the ship into an underwater city or series of compartments and things that are connected by tubes. And there's a company called the All Water Company who basically you jump in a tube and they kind of shoot you off to another part of the city.
Oh my god, I love that.
Yeah, filling it with water, and then you go shooting off, and that's how you get around. So you go from location to location. Yeah, you get flushed essentially, and it looks like that too, actually. So yeah, you're a maintenance guy who is at the very beginning of the game. You just kind of go around talking to people when you're meeting everyone and getting to know all the people that Harold knows, and everyone kind of knows everyone. Like, it's not a huge kind of environment. Pretty much there's enough people there that, well, there's few enough people there that everyone kind of knows who you are anyway, and there's maybe some people you don't know, but most of them you're on terms with. But pretty quickly on, you kind of get the vibe that there's some sort of conspiracy going on, perhaps, maybe, don't know. But there's like an internal speaker system that goes throughout the entire thing, and they make announcements and things from the people who run the joint. So the captain of the ship kind of is running the whole settlement. And now it's like many, many years later. It's like 2,000 days after they crashed, because there's like a ticker that goes along. And I think it's like 1,800 and something. And each day it kind of ticks on again. So, you know, they're well established in this environment, and they've kind of grown up here and everything. So, yeah, it's been a while. But at one point, you kind of, as the maintenance guy, you kind of overhear a broadcast which seems like a message from Earth, where before that you've been told that no broadcasts or anything could actually get through because of all the ocean and everything and the way the planet is. So, but then something does get through, so you kind of like, maybe they're not telling the truth. And they kind of, and maybe it's kind of edited as well, because they kind of cut it off at one point, and you know, there's a bit of that kind of like someone's manipulating shit here.
Suspicious.
Yeah. And you're kind of also part of your job is you help out a bunch of scientists and stuff who are living there and trying to research different things. And one of the scientists that you help out a lot, who's like your kind of not best friend, but, you know, close colleague or whatever, she figures out that the ocean planet that you're on is typically surrounded in storms, but every now and then, about every 80 years or so, there's like a 2-year period where the storms subside, and, you know, you can essentially get out of the planet or get off the planet. And she's just figured out that you're in one of those periods at the moment, but that period's about to finish in like 80 days or something, which I think is going to be like the main thrust of the story, is perhaps you trying to figure out or help other people figure out how to kind of get off this planet and perhaps head back to Earth, because one of the transmissions that you get from Earth, and this is all early stuff, so, you know, it's not really spoilery, but one of the transmission says something like, you know, actually you all left, but we managed to fix Earth anyway, and now that we're like a few thousand days after that, we've kind of turned it around and we're all good and everyone's alive here, and, you know, Earth is thriving, kind of thing. So you go talk to some other dudes and some scientists and stuff, who one of them's kind of figuring out a rocket ship to kind of get off the planet and trying to do the science behind it and all that kind of thing. And at the moment, that's where I'm just, as Harold Halibut, I'm just kind of helping people out with things and running errands and, you know, going and talking to different people to get different resources to help out other people to find out more about whatever it is they're researching and all that kind of thing. So I'm still, I think it feels like the story is going to head into a bit of the, you know, what's really going on. Are the powers that be trying to keep you there and kind of keep you in the dark? Or are you going to try and leave the planet and go back to Earth, or that kind of thing? And I think that's where it's going, but I could be wrong because, again, it's early days, so it's hard to kind of tell. However, what's great about this game is first and foremost the presentation, because as I said last week, it's got this kind of stop motion animation style, which again, I haven't done any research since last week, so I'm not 100% sure if it is actual stop motion or if it's kind of 3D animated but made to look like practical stop motion, because it's very, very good. Like, it's very smooth. It's kind of, some of the movement and stuff is kind of too smooth. You kind of expect it to be a little bit jankier if it is proper stop motion, but then I don't know why it wouldn't be proper stop motion either, because I know they can get it that smooth anyway. So
What I've heard about it is that it's supposed to be like they made the models like in real life, and
yeah,
then they scanned it, and then they made like the stop motion things.
yeah, it does definitely feel like a blend, if anything. Like you say, like, that wouldn't surprise me at all, because it looks fucking awesome, really, to put it bluntly. However, yeah, the animation sometimes is a little too good, and there are definitely elements that are obviously not stop motion, like when there's water splashing and that kind of thing. That's obviously a graphic kind of effect, like a computer effect. But it look, whatever they're doing, it looks amazing either way, and I really like it. And there's some really good, like, they use the camera really well as well. So it's typically from like almost a side on kind of point of view, like it's all 3D, so you've got depth to each level and everything, but it's essentially a side on kind of perspective. But when you have like conversations with people and stuff, it'll zoom in so that you're kind of looking over their shoulder and then back and forth again, like it would in a movie, where when you're having a conversation, you can kind of see a lot closer and you can get everyone's expressions and all that kind of thing a lot easier. And there's a little bit of like dialogue choice and that sort of thing. I don't know if it really matters so far. Like, I don't feel like it's a hugely branching story or anything, because it just feels like you're hitting key moments and finishing key kind of tasks and that sort of thing. But at the moment, it's freaking awesome, and will probably be my focus between now and next podcast, because, or next episode, I should say, because yeah, I really want to get stuck in and really kind of see where the story is going to go, because I'm still in the first couple of hours, and I think it's a bit longer than that anyway. So, you know, we'll have to see how it all pans out. Slight little side note, which I just thought was fun. One of the voice actors in it, and the voice acting is all really good and everything's voice acted, but one of the voice actors is a guy I used to work with when I had a job that I worked at about 10, 15 years ago. And I know this guy has done a bunch of voice acting stuff anyway. And it was just fun to see him show up in this game, because I kind of recognized his voice, because obviously I know the dude and he's got a recognizable voice. He's been in lots of other kind of indie projects as well and smaller games. He was in Dust Elysian Tale. He was like the villain in that game. And he's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's got an IMDb page. That doesn't really matter. In this game, he plays one of the main other people that you meet. He plays your friend who's like a scientist kind of guy. And it's just, yeah, for me personally, it was just fun to kind of start talking to this character and go, hey, that sounds familiar. That sounds like Ed's voice. And it's like, yeah, it actually is. So cool. Not that necessarily makes the game better or worse. It's just, yeah, a
That's
fun
a
little
fun.
fact that I think I'd point out, because it's kind of cool. Because I know from him, the way he got into voice acting, just as a little side tangent, was essentially doing it all remotely and doing like recording his lines on his computer and like uploading it and stuff, like from a kind of amateur level, that he then got into more professional stuff for like smaller studios and things, because obviously he's not a big name voice actor for AAA games, so he's not charging as much as they would. But it was a really good way for him to get into it, and he's got lots of credits on his IMDb page. So, you know, it's kind of, for anyone who's interested in that sort of thing, there are entire websites and stuff and communities of voice actors I know who, you know, put up their profile essentially on these websites, and then a lot of indie developers who need voice acting will kind of go there and go, oh, that's the kind of voice I'm after or whatever, and they'll hire people from all around the world who are basically capable of recording their own lines and then sending them in, kind of thing. So yeah, if anyone's ever interested in that sort of thing, it's definitely doable. basically because I know a guy who does it. So, so yeah, that's Harold Halibut. It's really, really cool. Again, it's on Game Pass. Definitely an easy recommend for anyone on Game Pass. But even if I had to buy it, I'd still probably buy it. Like if they took it off Game Pass tomorrow, I'd go buy it to finish it off, kind of thing. So yeah, very much looking forward to where that game is going to take me because it's very intriguing. So yeah,
Chicken indeed.
speaking of indie games, let's have a chat about what indie, quote unquote, might mean in 2024. So, as a bit of a
Yeah.
preamble, this was something we were thinking about because I find it comes up quite often in discussions about games and things, and as well as other genres of media like music or film or whatever. But we're going to talk about games, obviously. But something being independent or indie, I feel like in every form it kind of loses its meaning over time and becomes something else because obviously the original meaning of anything being independent kind of means that for games especially, if a game is made by an independent studio and an indie game, it usually means it's a smaller studio or whatever. But for my money, and Paula, you can tell me if you agree, but the original meaning for indie was basically a studio that made games or whatever without the backing of a big publisher and did their own distribution and did their own publishing, essentially. Kind of like a band who isn't signed to a label but still put their music out before digital distribution was such a huge thing, perhaps. And that's kind of what indie was.
Yeah, like I'm not entirely sure because I wasn't like playing when I wasn't playing indie games when they first started like to appear or like being like more widespread.
Yeah.
But yeah, like from my understanding, indie game is usually made like on a tighter budget by a smaller team. And well, I guess usually without an external publisher.
Mm.
But nowadays, like they kind of like need the publisher in some cases, especially if they want to have more of a budget, or like a budget at all in some cases.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think of, say, like a lot of punk music, which is traditionally very much do it yourself, as in record it yourself, release it yourself, distribute it yourself, all that kind of thing, without any big money backing you. Just kind of make it and do it and make it happen. And I think that's kind of similar to games where, to me, the big difference is there's no big budget kind of company just paying for everything, which
Yeah.
I often just, that's what I'd call a publisher. But so you're kind of, it's a studio or a single developer even, or whoever, who's working off their own uh, resources, and maybe they've got another job to pay for it, kind of thing as well. And the typical kind of what we think of as indie developers these days is pretty much the same thing, but it has changed a lot over the years and over time, as these things do. Because obviously, if you don't have a big publisher or you don't have a big budget, that kind of also frees you up to do things that perhaps are a bit riskier or a bit different, or maybe smaller or shorter or not worth so much money, or, you know, so I think indie then turns into a bit of a genre of its own where it can kind of encapsulate any kind of small team feel or something that is kind of a bit different and weird. Often might just get called indie, like, oh, it's a little indie game, so it's kind of weird, and they're taking risks that maybe you wouldn't take as a big publisher with all that money behind it. And yeah, I feel like it kind of ends up not meaning independent anymore, but meaning a style, I guess.
Yeah, in a way, especially it is more noticeable nowadays than um, game budgets, especially like in the AAA side of things, have ballooned into the stratosphere at this point. So since there's so much money and so many people's interest in the line because of that, they cannot take as many risks as they would
Mm.
as in the studios. Like, well, in the studios, still have to take into account like, do they want to make like the one game and call it a day, or do they actually want to make a living off of making games? And that
Mm.
is like such a huge question that I have to answer, because uh, for any games, like for AAA studios, a bad game isn't necessarily like the end of the studio. It's gonna mean that maybe the game doesn't sell as well. They have to fire a few people. They have to restructure stuff, whatever. For a very small indie studio, a game not performing well at all might mean the death of the studio,
Mm.
like outright.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of pressure, but at the same time, they find a compromise between what they feel they sell, but also like trying to put their own vision and spin into things. So it's kind of interesting how indie studios work in a way.
Well, and I think these days as well, something that kind of perhaps warps the idea of that is the idea of, say, smaller publishers who very much publish small studio games and nothing else. So, and they don't necessarily pump money into it either, but they help with distribution and marketing, perhaps, as opposed to, say, your Activisions or whoever who would pump actual money into getting a game developed. I'm thinking studios or publishers like Team 17,
Mm-hmm.
who do a bunch of quote unquote indie games, or smaller games as well, or even places like Focus Entertainment, who do bigger games, but they also do some kind of weird little niche stuff as well, and they'll pick up the weird little indie studio game as well as kind of the big blockbuster that is going to sell heaps of copies. So in a way, they're almost like independent publishers because they're not, uh, they don't own any studios. They just kind of pick up games as they come. But they also, I'm sure they do spend some money on certain things, but they're more about supporting the game as opposed to owning it and publishing it to make a bunch of money. I'm sure they'll want to make money. Don't get me wrong, but you know, I think of businesses like Activision where, yeah, they have much more power over their developers because they're probably paying for everything, so they want all the money back and they want to make shitloads of money too. Because we've all heard of publishers reporting that they're not going to make another Tomb Raider game or something because the last one only made, say, $20 million profit and they wanted more. So
Yeah,
I think Square Enix does that a lot, actually.
Square Enix does that. It really does that a lot. Even like with games that haven't like sold that amount like ever.
Yeah.
I find that it's kind of stupid, but yeah.
Yeah. And so
Uh,
the big publishers want to like sell enough to fund the next game rather than just make a profit on what they spent, because they want to keep the business going and they want to keep the train rolling. Whereas I feel like, yeah, like you say, independent games, some studios, yeah, if they have one flop, that's kind of the death of the studio because they really can't afford to keep going after that. So it's an interesting kind of difference, I think.
Yeah, though there's a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. That first of all, uh, when an indie studio decides, "Hey, we're gonna try to pick a publisher for us," first of all, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. And I know this well, partially because I follow a channel where called Leyendas and Videojuegos. That is a Spanish channel.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy in charge pretty much is trying to, with a group of friends, make their own game. That's like in a very big oversimplification, it will be like Stardew Valley in space.
Cool.
And the game is called Four Months. It has, obviously, it has like differences to Stardew Valley, but the too long didn't really Stardew Valley in space.
Yep.
Um, but they try to look for a publisher, and they run into a bunch of issues. First of all, when you go with your game to present it to a publisher, the publisher has to be hopefully one that publishes similar kinds of games to the thing you're trying to develop.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it turns out that since the publisher does usually help either like financially, like straight up financially, or like giving a bit of stuff for you, like no, I don't know, if you're liking an animator, they lend you kind of like of their own animators,
Oh, cool.
plus doing the marketing, plus doing uh, other things related to the publishing of the game,
Yep.
such as localization.
Yeah.
Like they usually, well, they may or may not be in charge of localization, especially if the developers kind of provide for that, but the publisher does want it to be localized to many languages. They have to provide for that.
Mm-hmm.
But they may also want to change the scope of the game.
Yeah.
Because, of course, since they want to have a game that sells as much as possible, they may even want to change the structure of your game if they think that would sell more.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a double edged sword, because, in a way, you lose a bit of creative freedom in a way
Mm.
in exchange for the budget and the personnel and the help and all that stuff. And also, you have to get that money back eventually through the sales of your game.
Mm.
And even after you give that back, there's still like, let's say, some kind of royalty that you have to pay to the publisher, because, well, they did all the job, so they are co-owners of the game that you made.
Mm.
So everything else you want to make with that IP has to be run down uh, by by the other people that own your game. So in that regard, it's like, yeah, having help for publishing, localization, even developing the game can give you a big advantage, but it comes with a cost. Uh, so unless you manage to find like a perfect match for your project, sometimes you may be better off even without a publisher. Though it
Yeah.
may end up with lower sales, but at the very least, maybe you made just the right amount of money to keep going, and that game is yours, like
Yeah.
truly yours, and you can make whatever you want with that.
Yeah. It seems like you'd need to really kind of, like you say, like get someone who matches your kind of vision even a bit, and you want a partnership that'll make the whole thing greater than the sum of its parts. Kind of, it'll make everyone succeed better. And I guess that's the gamble you take if you try to go with a publisher or something.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think what's interesting as well these days, and I think this is kind of a natural progression for something like calling something indie or not, is kind of what that actually means.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Because in my mind, I think of indie and I think, like everything we've said, like a small studio, perhaps lower budget, perhaps a bit more creative, a bit more, willing to take risks, that kind of thing. But they're not making big blockbuster full price games. They're making smaller, cheaper games because they've got lower overheads, lower costs as well, because they don't have big, 10,000 person teams in the studio that they're all trying to pay. So, when you've got a bunch of maybe 5 people or 20 people even or something, obviously your costs are much lower than someone who's got thousands. So, that's what I think of when I think of independent games. But then it kind of, these days, if you say indie, it kind of also dictates almost a genre of games. But also we're seeing in actual indie studios who are quite big these days and make big, very good, top quality kind of games. So we've got terms like double A instead of triple A that people throw around to say, oh, it's, triple A is your big, your big studios your Ubisofts and your rock stars and all that kind of stuff. Whereas AA is like, I don't know, I think maybe someone like City Project Red would be AA because they make big games and they're kind of a big studio, but they did have independent roots, and even though they run GOG and all that kind of thing, they as a studio they kind of did their own thing and made the Witcher series and made lots of money, so they've definitely got big budgets, but they're still kind of perhaps an indie studio.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, funnily enough, I've been talking about this topic first of all with my boyfriend. We were talking about what is an indie game at this point in
Mm.
2024, just yesterday. But also with the guys over at Voyager, the ones that make What Lies in the Multiverse. It seems they're like internally using a term called triple I,
Ah,
like
cool.
I of indie, mainly because it's not about the scope; it's about the ideas behind the project.
Right.
So, for example, you have Super Giant Games that they
Yes.
started as just a tiny little indie game studio that they could be even considered like AAA because how 80s, well, 80s pretty much skyrocket uh, the hell out of them.
Mm.
And Hades 2 does have a much bigger budget in a way. But they still have that soul to their games that is not something you would find on AAA games. Like they still manage to make something unique and something like even more they think more out of the box than AAA studios, but they do have a bigger budget than most indie studios. So thus
Yeah.
the term AAA, triple I, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one way to see it. Stray, for example, uh, was is also an indie game, but it's more of a triple I experience because they, uh, even though it's a shorter game, it still has a bigger scope than most indie games. And then you
Mm.
have Dave the Diver. Dave the Diver caused such a big controversy over the Game Awards because it was, I think, on the indie game nominations of the awards.
Yeah.
And the thing is that even though the studio that make Dave the Diver could technically be called an indie studio, that indie studio was made by a much bigger studio with all the funding in the world. Was it called Nexon or something like that?
Yeah. Nexon.
So Nexon. So yeah, they have the money bags, and they said, "Hey, let's make an indie game." So at that point, it was like this is like a double A game disguised as a fucking indie game because like no first indie game is gonna have that amount of funding or that amount of people working in it. So it was like uh, very a very thing like a very interesting conversation that had to take place because of that.
Yeah. Well, and there's a good there's an article that you linked me, Paula, with Jeff Keighley talking about the whole Dave the Diver situation. Jeff Keighley, of course, who hosts the Game Awards, and it was actually a pretty good article because he says, yeah, it's a difficult question to kind of answer because Dave the Diver was made by a small team, but it had a big fuck off high budget publisher.
Yeah.
But the way he tells it as well, he says, well, it's independent in spirit, and it is a small game, despite what the budget is and all that kind of thing. It still feels like it's a kind of small indie kind of title because of, like you say, because of the scope and because of the way it was made and how it feels to play and all that kind of thing. Which I think is interesting because it kind of shows that how that evolution of the term indie kind of goes from meaning something very functional, as in an independent studio, to something that's more a genre kind of classification or the feeling of a game is indie, whatever the hell that means. And hence why we're kind of having this discussion, I guess, because it is kind of interesting to tease that apart and see, well, why is that? And what
Yeah.
does that actually mean? So
Yeah, definitely. Uh, the Dave the Diver. Holy crap! I cannot speak to save my life. The Dave the Diver situation was kind of again kind of a big thing, but still kind of feels like cheating in a way. To have that considered in the yo like yeah, it was made by a smaller team with a more like indie approach, I guess.
yeah.
But yeah,
No, it kind of
uh,
makes me think of things like Devolver Digital games. Like Devolver Digital to me are kind of an independent publisher, if there is such a thing. As in their whole thing is getting weird, quirky, independent games that they then are obviously very good at marketing and all that kind of thing because they've made a big name for themselves and they've definitely made a lot of money, I'm sure.
definitely.
But I even use the term like, oh, that feels like a Devolver Digital game because they do publish a certain style and a certain type of kind of game that there's usually something, there's a bit of a vibe or something about the kind of games that they publish and the kind of games that they pick up and promote. So sometimes I'll be playing a game and I'm like, man, this feels like it would be a Devolver Digital game because it's the kind of thing that they would do. So I can kind of relate that back to then thinking, well, this feels like it's the kind of game that would be an indie game or would be from a small independent publisher, despite its budget or anything. And I can understand that reasoning then thinking, well, this Dave the Diver, I haven't played David the Diver, but by all accounts, it sounds like it has that kind of vibe again. Like it feels like a lower budget kind of small team kind of game. So perhaps these days that is exactly what indie is it's more that kind of vibe that you get from a game in contrast to say your Call of Duties or your Assassin's Creeds or your Tomb Raiders or the big budget stuff that is obviously worked on by huge teams because it's got that kind of detail and that kind of scope of the whole game.
Yeah, and in that regard, it's almost like since some indie games are like most indie games are worked by smaller studios. Uh, I'm not gonna say that you can see like each individual's influence, but you can see maybe like each individual's ideas in a way. Whereas when you have so many people working on a single game, you kind of get to the point where all those ideas get a little bit flattened
Yeah.
uh, in a way. So, for example, there were like a shit ton of people working on Breath of the Wild, even though it has like its own thing going on and its spirit and all that stuff. You can still tell that so many people, there were so many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, and it
Uh,
doesn't mean that AAA games are bad. They're just a different
yeah,
beast. Like,
yes.
you know, like yeah. And I remember let's go back in time to Indie Game the movie. if ever, I'm sure everyone has seen it at some point. Great doco.
I haven't.
Oh, well, you should because it's really you know it's really good.
Where can I watch
Especially
it actually?
if you're into video games, it's kind of a must watch, I would say, because it's really interesting. But there's a quote from Jonathan Blow in that, who is a famous independent game developer who he made the game Braid and went on to make Witness, or The Witness rather. But he's also known for being quite the character in the indie game scene and quite controversial in certain ways because he has very strong opinions on things and is happy to express them. But there's a really good quote from him in that movie where he's talking about big budget games compared to independent games and small studio games. And he's saying how big budget games, they need to make money so much, so they kind of smooth out all the corners of the game. They make sure everything is super polished and nothing is offensive and nothing is weird and nothing is strange. You know what you're going to get. You're going to be satisfied. They can almost guarantee it, kind of thing. Whereas an indie game can take more risks and just kind of go, this is the niche little fucked up thing I'm making. Who's with me, kind of thing. Because you've got, there's less jobs on the line. There's less, there's more creative freedom because there's less people involved, all that kind of thing. But if you're a big budget game company who's making like the next Call of Duty, you need to make sure that hopefully your people get paid and hopefully your publishers do make a lot of money so that they'll pay for the next one and all that kind of thing. So you're trying to guarantee it by cutting out all the risk. Whereas an independent game, you kind of want a risk because that might be the thing that makes you stand out and makes you actually succeed. So it's a
Definitely.
whole different kettle of fish in that sense.
And I agree with that because you can see like so many different like outlooks, both outlooks in life or ideology or things like that on indie games that are or even like tiny comments or dialogue pieces that would never ever make their way into like a AAA game because that would cause quite a controversy.
Yeah.
Like imagine like the wheelchair thing from that we discussed about
Oh,
the
yeah,
other
from
day.
Spiritfarer.
Yeah, from Spiritfarer. Imagine I don't know, Nintendo or Sony doing something like that.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Well, and not to mention, like, these companies also have like shareholders and stock prices and all that kind of stuff that gets affected by not doing so well or making waves and being controversial. So they've got way more considerations financially than say a small team who are just doing their own thing. So
That way. Right, the stakeholders are quite a scary thing indeed.
well, and especially considering that a lot of stakeholders and shareholders and stuff, they don't give a fuck about the game. They just want to make money. Like,
Yeah, definitely.
which I think is kind of perhaps the ugly, dark side of big budget game development that we all know about, where, you know, because it's all such a big money making machine, that's where you end up getting really bad practices and all that kind of stuff happening. But yeah,
Definitely.
that's a topic for another day.
That is a topic for another day. Otherwise, will take forever. But yeah, um, in the end, I do feel like at this point in time, when you're talking about indie games, you're talking about that feel of the creators having like a bit more freedom, uh, or maybe like a smaller budget and working around those constraints and ending up with some interesting or different idea, uh, like in return, which
Mm.
is kind of interesting because in a way, when you are playing an indie game and it feels like too generic, uh, like it kind of defeats the point of it in a way.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would lead me to kind of a final thought question where do you think, Paula, that with the way that the term independent or indie game has like evolved over time and kind of turned into this more perhaps of a vibe as opposed to an actual function, do you think it's actually a useful kind of term to have anymore? Like, does it actually tell you much about a game? Because it can be quite broad as well and quite open.
I feel like indie game by itself may not be useful,
Mm.
uh, but if you know, at the very least, like knowing something is an indie game, you know, you pretty much know that it is a different kind of game or has a different kind of feel that games made by bigger studios. So in that
Yeah.
regard, I find it to be like a useful term. But I do like the idea of having like the triple I or like double I or something like that
Yeah.
kind of rating because then you would for sure know that this is a smaller team indie game, like the first indie game, like the first game made by this very tiny team, or hey, this is a probably like next Super Giants game, so it is a triple I game.
Well, I think it definitely kind of shapes your expectations, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because,
definitely.
yeah, if I hear that something's an indie game, I'm not going to expect it to be a big blockbuster mainstream kind of thing. Sometimes it could be, and it might surprise me, but I'm not expecting it to be.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, another interesting thing that I come to realize is that whenever you see like indie studios working in a game, like they're like I feel they're more willing to share either the process or like mishaps that happen through the development of the game,
Yeah.
mainly because they rely so much on the community that they've been forming for years.
Well, and I think that's something that you can, as a fan or as a gamer, you can get closer to a smaller studio, can't you? So I think a lot of small studios have realized that, especially with streaming and everything, and you know, online being the way it is, like having a Discord server where you can talk to your community and having perhaps live streaming your game development, that sort of thing, is actually quite valuable because then people can like really get close and like see how it all works and perhaps learn something or that for themselves or anything like that. And yeah, I think it is kind of a great marketing thing that smaller studios can do that perhaps bigger ones it would be a lot more difficult or perhaps even
Yeah,
just more
definitely.
boring because
Yeah, like, oh, actually, remember that one time the cult of the well, so the cult of the Lamb developers have
yeah,
like a very special way to do marketing. Let's do it a lot.
okay.
The thing is that at the nearing the end of the year of last year, I would have to actually find the thing to say I'm quoting it, but
Mm-hmm.
they made a post among the lines of, hey, if we reach so and so followers, or like, or if this post reaches like so and so likes, I think it was like followers, if we reach so and so followers, we'll do this sex update on the game. And everyone was like, what the okay, I'm in. And they reached their goal in like less than 24 hours
Nice.
and then some. And it was so funny to see like in real time. The best thing is that they did the update.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's like a win-win for everyone, isn't it? Because the audience has a good time and has a fun time with that, but then they also get more followers, so more people hear about their game, you know.
It is very funny to say they have more followers because it is a cult, but anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, I feel like the indie studios, when they have like, hey, we kind of want to do this kind of like, we have this idea. Do you like it?
Yeah.
Like, they can literally just ask the community and get a stupid response like that.
Which again is a discussion for another time, but I actually think isn't always a good thing because
True, it
kind of like
isn't.
with early access games, like there are a few early access games I've played that I kind of wish it wasn't early access because of player feedback, like of a minority of players, they've actually fundamentally changed parts about the game where I think you should have just stuck to your guns and stuck to your own vision and your own artistic kind of creativity and your own direction, because then the result at the end would have made it worth it perhaps, as opposed to a couple of people didn't like it along the way, so you change the whole thing. And yeah.
True. Like in this case, I feel it was more helpful than not because
Yeah.
they were probably like, "Hey, this will probably sell, but we just want to make sure."
Yeah.
And then it
Oh yeah.
exploded into this big meme, and it was like a two-in-one situation where they created like, they were like, "Well, I guess we're doing this." Like, but even though if they already decided that they would do it, just having that with the community, I feel was like such a funny thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think I don't know about anyone else. Obviously, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but there are a bunch of indie games that perhaps I've really gotten into, and I've looked at the Steam forums, I've looked at their Discord, all that kind of thing, because I've wanted to find out more. And the small teams who do really kind of value and look after their community add so much to the whole game experience and the whole process, especially with in development stuff or early access stuff or that kind of thing, that I think it
Yeah.
is such a great way to for indie studios to access people and help promote themselves, even if it's a tiny community. Like there's a couple of games I'm thinking of where they had a very small community of very dedicated players,
Yeah.
and they were really good to those players, and really listened to them, and kind of not necessarily were told what to do by them, but kind of supported them and encouraged them and got to know them and were accessible to them and all that kind of thing. And that sort of thing you just don't get from a big company, obviously, because you just don't.
Definitely.
And it's also, I think, a lot less interesting. Like, do you really want to be close to Ubisoft when they're making, say, the next Assassin's Creed game, and perhaps the dude who's designing a single tree on an island is streaming it for like 8 hours? Maybe that's not as interesting as someone who's making an entire game on their own kind of streaming it as well. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. But I think indie has definitely changed and evolved over time, and like anything, it still kind of serves a purpose, but is very different to where it started, which I think is interesting.
Everything is different from where that start. Like even like the scope of AAA games have gotten stupid at this point. But anyway,
I think, don't quote me on this, but I think I'm going to actually just quickly Google it. So speaking of large budgets, just something I read the other day, and I just Googled it now. GTA 6 from Rockstar is reported to have a $2 billion budget.
excuse me.
Yeah, wrap your head around that one.
Like USD, like US to 2 billion. Like
Yes,
it's not like 2 million. It's 2,000 million.
yes.
Okay.
2 billion. And that does include marketing, and I imagine at least half of that is marketing, because it's Rockstar and it's Grand Theft Auto, so they're going to market the shit out of it. But
Definitely.
just the fact that someone spent $2 billion on a game, and to be fair, they'll probably make it back because it's GTA, so, they know they're onto a good thing regardless, but that is so much money.
It is a stupid amount of money.
But even reading that, my expectations for that game now are just through the roof. Like, if I pick up GTA 6, which I will because I like the series, and it's anything but amazing, I'll be disappointed, because I'll know that they spent $2 billion on this fucking thing. And and if it ends up not feeling like they spent that much money on it, I'm going to be a bit disappointed.
That's disappointing. Some people are gonna be like, uh, with their pitchforks
Well, that too,
and torches, like because it was like this feels like a skunk. Goddammit.
but anyway, yeah. Let's. Have you got any final thoughts on any of that, Paula?
Just that. Hey, support your local indie studios. Are either big or small because we like that.
Well, and I would definitely say for anyone who perhaps hasn't dipped their toe into much indie stuff before, it's definitely worth checking out, because there are very interesting and creative games out there that are not shit, that actually are good quality and actually are made really well and tell good stories. So I know most people listening to this are probably pretty enthusiasts anyway when it comes to games, so they're all over it. But you never know. If you're like a big mainstream kind of gamer, that's cool, but maybe have a little tinkle in the shallow pool every now and then.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe your next favorite game is gonna be an indie game. Who knows?
Some of my favorites are definitely small indie games, like, without a doubt. And I do like the big blockbusters as well. Like, I'm that guy who does enjoy the Assassin's Creeds and all that kind of stuff. So, I know there are some people who like poo-poo all the big mainstream stuff, but I think it's cool. It's just very, very different. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Well then, and now we're to the final section of this podcast, which is the guessing game. Josh, do you have
Hooray.
your thinking cap on?
Well, I always think I do, but then I don't. So we'll see.
Well, I got you a little game here. I'm gonna say the main story is around 13 hours and a half.
Okay.
This particular person took an hour less, so 12 hours and a half.
Okay.
No, wait, that is not the one.
Nope.
This is the one, sorry. This one took 11 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay.
And I'm picking like a very interesting comment that may or may not give it away.
Fingers crossed.
And it says, committed small amounts of genocide against the government. Happy face.
Small amounts of genocide against the government. The government.
The government.
So not just any old government. So it's not like a civilization game or something, because there are multiple governments. And this is the government. Committed small amounts of genocide against the government. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get taken down because of that comment.
Hey, it's legit. Small amounts of genocide against the government. Could it be like Prototype?
No.
Okay.
It is not.
Just because I know that game you kill lots and lots of people that could be considered genocide. Genocide's an interesting word though. Like, are they being serious? Like, is it actually genocidal, or is it just lots and lots of killing? Is the thing.
Like, I've heard about this game, but I don't know the details, so...
Yeah, totally, yeah. So what kind of games have a government that you can attack? Or maybe are their own entity? Could it be... No, that's not right. Man, I every time we do this, I feel like it's right there at the edge of peripherals of the periphery of my brain, but not letting me grasp it. So, committed small amounts of genocide against small amounts of maybe it's like,
yeah, small amounts.
Maybe it's like a makes me think of maybe like even like a SimCity kind of game, but not.
It isn't.
Okay. What games do you fight the government? Yeah, no, if you could like get into my brain, it would be a bit more like. Like trying to think, but there's nothing there.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hit me up with another one.
Oh my god. Okay, so for main plus sites, it's around 26 and a half hours, so it can be a long game if you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
This person, it seems they did like, I don't know if it's too much, but they took 13 hours and 50 minutes.
Oh.
And says, all but one companion got kicked out of one faction because completing all the quests, ignored to task, otherwise complete.
That makes me think it's like a Skyrim kind of game.
It is.
So companions, factions, quests. Oh lord. Or a Watch Dogs, maybe? Government thinking? Or...
No.
Suddenly it makes me think open worldy. But I don't know why. Ignored 2 tasks, otherwise complete. Kicked out of one faction before completing all quests. There's factions and companions.
Yeah, looking at your time, you took quite a bit of time with this one.
Spent a lot of time in it, did I?
Yeah, 36 hours and 50.
It's not like Fallout 3.
No.
No. Okay.
No, but you're kind of getting close in a way. Not gonna tell you how.
Or Outer Wilds.
No.
Outer Worlds.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I know, Outer Wilds is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, that's why I had to stop and think, because it was like, yeah, that's another game, so no, it ain't native.
Outer Worlds, yeah.
It is the Outer Worlds.
The same mob who did Fallout, wasn't it? I think, was it Obsidian who did Outer Worlds? I think it was.
I don't know, let me check real quick.
It was one of them. Yeah, Obsidian.
So
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, Obsidian Entertainment.
Yeah. All right. Well, man. So, small amounts of genocide against the government. Wonder how that comes into it, because maybe I just don't remember the game that well.
Maybe, I don't know. I thought it was like a good clue, but it seems it wasn't.
Yeah, no. I mean, it is as much as anything else, but yeah. I'm just trying to think. I guess you can attack the government, really. Like, you're against them, for want of a better word. Yeah. Yeah, companions and factions just immediately makes me think of Fallout, which, is the same kind of deal. So that was a good one. But yeah. How much time did I spend in it?
It says you spent. Wait, let me. You logged it as main plus sites. It says you spent 36 hours and 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And your comment says, it would have been like very funny to give your own comment that says campaign plus all side quests that I could find, not all achievements.
Yeah. That's very generic, isn't it? It doesn't really tell you much about the game.
Yeah, if it wasn't like if it has some more spice, I would actually like throwing your own comment against you just to make it extra funny.
It would be funny because I don't think it would help me at all. So cool. Well, that was Outer Worlds then. Nice one. And 2 more points for me. That brings me within 4 points. So still a couple of. I need you to lose twice, and I need to win twice to be in with a chance. And
Yeah.
something tells me that's not going to happen. So we shall see. We still got
We shall.
what, 5 rounds left?
I don't know. I feel like that counter is messed up because I'm pretty sure we have more than 15 rounds at that point.
I've definitely looked
But anyway,
and checked, and I think it is accurate because we had a lot. We didn't play much over Christmas, New Year as well, so we missed a few weeks there in this cycle anyway. Or maybe that was the previous cycle. I can't remember. Whatever. I did look once and it did make sense. So
if you say so. Well then, that would mark the end of another episode of the How Long to Beat podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you everyone who listened to this couple of fools rambling about games. What are your opinions on indie games? What is an indie game to you at this point in time? Leave that in the comments below. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. It's always a pleasure. No point doing it if no one listens, so thank you for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Hey, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Sadaku in particular, like Sadaku is like the best wingman.